Good. Now let's jump into the second case, which is a Granfondo equipment comparison. So I start a new equipment optimization. I load in my Granfondo, which is the Alpenbreve, which is a Swiss Granfondo with 200 Ks and around 5,000 meters of climbing.
Yeah, so it's a typical one where we've had in the past local athletes here in Switzerland asking us, oh, it's 5,000 height meters, I'm going to take my lightest weight bike. And we said, well, does that make sense? Or do you want to take the more aero bike? Because it's a rolling course, it's got a lot of downhill. So it's a perfect example of where we can do an equipment optimization to figure out what is actually the fastest solution.
Yeah, we're going to compare wheels here.
Here we'll, yeah, compare wheels.
Yeah. As you see, it's like 42 segments. So I'll have to load a wind forecast as well. This might take a bit longer than before, but here we go. And then we have the groups and power. For equipment optimization, the grouping is not as critical as for pacing, but I suggest doing it anyway, because in the results it will help you to analyze the findings, because it will be grouped into those groups and you can still look at the individual segments. So I go here, grouping entire course, and apply the default grouping here.
And it's also important to say here, for example, the first group is flat with tailwind. If you then a week later redo your simulation and the wind forecast has changed and it's a wind still day, like no wind, okay, there's never no wind, but let's say it's no wind, you'll no longer have this tailwind or headwind segment or group anymore because there's no wind. So the grouping can change depending on the weather.
Yeah. In this case, it has how many? 8 groups. Yeah. By default, it applies a constant power strategy to the simulation, which is okay for most of the equipment optimizations because it's not really that important for equipment choice. But if you find those values are maybe not accurate enough, you can modify them here. And by the way, you can also, from a pacing strategy optimization, start an equipment optimization. So if you have your pacing strategy from an optimization, you can also apply it to an equipment optimization. So in this case, I just say, okay, I will push a bit harder on steep climbs, and maybe on descents, I will only go for 200. But as said, it's not that important. Here I can choose the comparison type. In this case, I want to compare different wheel options. For that, I have to select a rider setup, which is the road setup in this case.
So again, we have the different roads set up with the different CDA for the various positions. We take various assumptions for you in this. Of course, if you know better, because you've done a barn test or a track velodrome test, or you've been in the wind tunnel, of course, and you can make your own numbers up. Yeah.
And then I will add some wheel options. Maybe your initial guess would be to go for the shallow wheels. So let's pick that one. But then I will also add like a more aero setup, which for road is probably a 65 millimeter run.
And what you can see here is this generic wheel. So one of the first things we did, of course, being Swiss side, is we had Swiss side wheels in here. But then, of course, from the beta testers, the feedback was, yeah, well, we don't have Swiss side wheels. We want to be able to put any wheels. So one of the advantages we have, of course, is we test pretty much all the wheels that come out on the market. So we've created these generic wheel options, which have the characteristics typical of generic wheels. And of course, if you do have Swiss side wheels, you have the option to choose our specific wheel models, which bring those specific characteristics, aero and weight characteristics into the simulation. But for this particular one, we use the generic wheels because we're interested in deep versus shallow section, more aero versus lighter weight.
Now I have two options, like the shallow one and the deeper, with the same tires. I will add another one that has also the deep section wheels, but the Aero 111 tire. I could have done only two options, the shallow ones and then an Aero option, but I don't recommend this because then you don't really know, is it the tire or is it the wheels? So I will create three options just to learn what's the difference between the wheels and what's the difference between the tires.
Exactly. We're only ever changing one parameter at a time.
So let's check this, the same rear tire. Yeah, okay. And now I can run the optimization. Again, this might take a while.
The more segments, the longer it takes. 250 kilometer race or 210 kilometer race can take some minutes to run, depending on the complexity, the number of groups, the number of segments, etc. So we see here you can go and grab yourself a cup of tea, but yeah, it shouldn't take too long.
Or you can chat with the AI chatbot, which is still in that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, while the simulation is running, yeah, there's at the bottom of the tool there is the chatbot, which has been prompted with some of our information, so that helps you interpret the results. So you can ask it some questions. That's of course something we'll be continuously improving along the way. In the meantime, we have our results.
Yeah, and as you see, actually the Aero setup is the fastest. So the setup with the deep section wheels and the Aero 111 tire, followed by the deep sections wheel with the normal tires, and then yeah, the slowest one is actually the shallow rim option.
So again, what's important to see here is you get all of the insights. So you see, for this particular race, it's simulating that they're going to take 8 hours and 6 minutes to ride it. So it's a pretty big ride, and the difference is a minute, right? So it's a small difference. If you're looking to maximize the last minutes out of your race, this might be important for you. But again, one of the things talking about educating the rider, if the rider says, no, you know, I'm happy to give up a minute, to have a lighter weight setup, which is a little bit more agile, maybe a little bit easy to handle in the fast descents in the winds, because me as a particular rider, I'm more sensitive to that. You're given the information to make a data-based decision. So, you know, it's an educated decision, not a gut-based decision. You know you're giving up some seconds or a minute or whatever, but you're empowered to make that decision yourself.
Yeah. And let's dive a little bit deeper into the results. To do that, I deselect like the one option just to make this a little bit easier to interpret. So here you see group by group, yeah, what you actually gain or lose compared to the fastest setup. And you see here, actually, you only gain a little bit of time in the very steep climbs with the shallow wheel options. Otherwise, you will just lose time.
And you can see as well the steep climb in the metrics here, it's a 7%, 7% climb. So you can see the threshold here is around about the 7% level, when the lightweight wheel setup is going to be faster than the more aero heavier setup.
Yeah, now selected the steep climb group, and it shows you which segments we are talking about. Yeah, so in those segments you gain a little bit of time, but for example, in the descents you lose a lot of time. And if you, for whatever reason, somehow think, okay, in the descents I might, yeah, I don't really know if this is true. I mean, it is true, but if I'm interested in the differences in the descents, because I'm not good at descending, you can also exclude it here from this table, and then you see what it means without the 10. So you still gain a minute with the fastest setup. Yeah, that's it for this case.